We have it 7:03 your time, 4:03 mine. 4 board members. I can't see everybody who's in the audience. Is somebody at the table going to take minutes since I'm kind of managing?
Take minutes if it's, I'm gonna.
Thank you. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is vote to approve the meeting minutes from September 8th and September 15th.
Hold on, I've got to open up my doc. Hold on 1 second. I need a new doc. Switch files. I just don't do this. Just doing this. Oh, because I'm probably not. Sorry, guys, I forgot to get, what's the internet here again? That's why it's not working. And Concord guess, that's why it's not working. Okay. Like, why is this not working?
Cheryl, while you're booting up, is Susan Bates in the audience?
She is.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, how you doing? Just, I can't see you guys clearly. It looks like I heard John Higgins too.
Yep.
Hey, John, how you doing? Thanks for coming. You could have done Zoom.
Well, no, I was at White Pond for a good part of today.
Great.
I said it right too. I saw the same words.
Cheryl, just let me know when you're ready and I'll get going.
Just open, all right. Yep, I'm fine.
Okay, so we open the meeting now at 7:05. And the first thing I'd like to do is have the committee approve September 8th and 15th meeting minutes.
Second the motion.
Third, second, I agree.
Thank you. And yes, noted, Cheryl, that the 15th meeting minutes will clarify, you know, the mistake that was in the 8th meeting about the CPA. The second thing we wanted to do was approve the White Pond vision document. For everybody's edification, we've been at this for months now. We're on our version 7 red line. We've had feedback from the town. We've had feedback from town people and the committee itself, and experts in the field. So I thank everybody, especially Josh. I know, you know, you and I felt like we wrote a thesis, and you especially for formatting, et cetera. So thank you so much. I don't think we need to go through the vision ad nauseum because we all have seen it so many times. And we took everybody's, you know, information into account. Josh, if you'd like to share part of Appendix D, we can do that.
Yes.
I don't think we need to do the whole thing. But Appendix D, for people who aren't familiar with the vision, if you haven't seen it, it is on the town website. Appendix D is more about what the committee is suggesting for potential water quality testing in the future.
And so everyone knows, this is just cleaning up. I had received some comments from Cheryl. I received comments from Beth. I do not have the technical skill to clean this up. So this is just what we're doing. So this is Beth's language that she sent after the edits of version 6. As an interim step, WPAC recommends continuance of Dr. Bill Walker's water quality monitoring and restoration proposal. And Beth, I didn't understand this. Continue the use of SECI depth measurements. So we should continue the use?
Yeah, I think we continue using this because we've got a history and we continue to use it. You know, we'll be having to discuss who does that testing in the future. Right now, it's been people like Katie who's at the meeting, Carmen, and then Suzanne Langbridge and her daughter. So, but continue to use it because for historical purposes, we've got, you know, 20 years of it. And we need 3 more years added to the Excel sheets because that hasn't been updated in a while.
Okay. Great. And so the testing is simple and low cost. The neighborhood group has been collecting this information and plans to enter the data for trending purposes. The immediate and long-term water testing require more rigorous and consistent testing. I didn't quite understand this, just English-wise.
So shifting away from, what has been done, which is above, and then, the E. coli testing that the town does at the beach during the season. So what we're saying is beyond this testing, we require more rigorous and consistent testing, especially related to the blue-green algae blooms.
So beyond such a testing, there
me
should
see.
be
Yeah,
more.
to recommend, yeah, I would recommend.
Thank you.
More rigorous and consistent testing for the green algae blooms. How's that?
Fine.
Okay.
In addition, you can put that. And that's basis, Josh, BASIS, thank you. You can tell I did this at like midnight and didn't do a spell check.
Okay. Basis while the beach is in operation. WPAC also recommends multiple test sites for coliforms based on newly learned information on water movement due to wind and seiches.
Yeah.
Wait,
And that's also partly with what Jeff Parker had, and I see you joined Jeff, had also tested and found, some positives in other locations. So the suggestion is it's not just the beach.
We have to be careful here. There's always going to be E. coli positive testing. It's amounts, because every animal that poops in the pond, birds, turtles, they all have E. coli. So just positive testing doesn't mean anything. It's always amounts.
But the dirtiest places in the pond are not near the beach. I mean, there's some very filthy places. Thoreau Cove is disgusting, and there's a lot of places. And I don't think we just test at the beach. That's not enough.
It's fine. I
Yeah,
just
and
have to be clear that we
this-
understand that, so we don't look like we, I think we just have to be clear. Yeah, I know.
I think the state, the state, what is being done now, Cheryl, there are limits. It's just when you get over a certain amount of colony forming units or whatever the measurement will be is when you have to react.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I understand how it's done. I'm just saying, you just have to, it's just not, E. coli alone isn't, it doesn't indicate anything on its own. That's all.
So coliform levels, amounts, E coli amounts, levels.
I guess I would just say we recommend that this E. coli testing be done in areas other than at the beach. That way we don't have to, it's the same test. We're just asking that they expand it beyond the beaches. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's how I read it. That's how I meant it to be, Cheryl. So I'm not sure how we're reading it. We're interpreting it differently, but that's exactly what the recommendation is.
Yeah, I think we also need to do phosphorus and nitrogen testing, especially phosphorus.
Well, we'll talk
mean,
about that later. It's in the more rigorous testing that is in
Okay.
Appendix
Okay.
D. Yeah.
Sorry
But this
about
is really just in addition to what we're doing now.
Right.
Okay.
So it also recommends, I know we have to say recommends, but it recommends that this E. coli testing be conducted at sites other than the beach on a regular basis.
That's fine. That's what I thought it said, but that's fine with me.
So the state requires that E. coli testing be conducted on a weekly basis while the beach is in operation.
We recommend that this same
WPAC also
testing-
recommends the same test be conducted in multiple locations.
Yes. And we don't have to put where we're saying, but that was based on, some of the testing and worries about, people, animals, etc. So
That's
the cove.
That's clear.
Okay, Beth, does this text look okay to you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I thought that's fine. Absolutely. Okay.
So I'm going to do a copy paste here to the other, the version 7 document. Stop sharing
you.
for a moment and reshare. Shush. Sorry, my phone decided to start talking.
Got it. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, that was the wrong document.
What's the section called again? I guess it doesn't matter. I guess it's the-
Okay, so the text that you guys just cleaned up is going to replace everything through to further options.
Right. Correct.
Great. Okay, and then
We-
this part, Beth, I took what you did and I just cleaned up for English a little bit.
Okay, so the red lines that we were just looking at, there were no other ones in there.
There were, and they're in here as well, along
Okay.
with some
Yep.
just grammar cleanup.
Okay,
So further options. There,
so, go ahead.
so further options talks about Tully Lake. And then it's all the same text we've been looking at for the last month. And then the second option is the limb text cyanocasting.
Yep.
Again, just some cleanup. There were some different kinds of footnotes than the model that we're using here. And then this is all the same stuff.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Ready for a motion?
Oh, is this it? It's very
I
exciting.
approve.
I move that we
Right.
accept the vision statement as amended tonight.
Second.
Third. Terrific.
Fourth.
Great.
Agreed.
Everybody.
Okay, yay. So I see Terry Ackerman is on the phone and we've got Susan Bates in the room. You know, we will be sending that vision document off to you tonight. That's what we agreed. So after you guys have a look at it, then we can set up a meeting to discuss it with the select board. Does that sound acceptable?
Yeah.
Terry,
Tomorrow.
Terry, Susan?
So that was a yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm so happy. Just a little note about the water quality testing as well. We have a meeting set up October 5th. John Higgins, who's in the room, Nancy Leland, the limnologist, myself, Susan Rascandelia will be meeting and talking about water testing options and pricing and costs. So that's another forward move, positive movement. So just so you're all aware, and we can report on what that meeting, you know, how it ended at the next WPAC meeting, which is October 27th. The next thing is the White Pond Youth Conservation Group was going to originally speak tonight about the septic data they've collected. They've done a lot of work. We've moved that to October 27th so that Susan Resk can also attend, because we think that there'll be, you know, technical questions that the youth group can't answer, but Susan and her expertise can. So just everybody mark your calendars, October 27th. Youth group will be presenting and Susan Resk is an invited speaker and guest. The next, go ahead.
Before we go on, I have a question. Jeff and Jim, will you guys have met with Susan Rask by then? And so can that just be like septic and sewage night?
Sure. We've already met with her and I've got some notes from our meeting.
Terrific.
Great.
Do you want to go through that now, or do you want to wait until we do the big septic and sewage evening?
No, I saw number 6, you know.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, Josh, we'll do it at the end when we do our volunteer groups. Okay. Fourth on the agenda is update on the CPA application. The WPAC successfully got the CPA application for use of the APOD for, you know, helping to clean up the cyanobacteria. So that was submitted on time, and that was another thesis work. We have to present October 19th to the commission, and you know, I'll be there. I think Josh and myself will both go. If anybody else is interested in attending, it's, I believe, an open meeting, and that's the first meeting is October 19th, as I said. Any questions before I move on to the next?
No.
Great. So
I
number 5.
have a
go ahead.
question. Beth. Have you received any other feedback about the application so far?
No, you know, the only feedback I've gotten is I asked John Higgins to take a look at it as well, you know, because I'd like to add some, you know, we have to put this PowerPoint together to present to the town. And I would think it would benefit from some photos of the APOD and some of this preliminary data that has been collected. And I think this is a great segue to have, you know, John is next on the agenda and Nancy to talk about, you know, what they've seen so far with the APOD. So if that's okay with everybody, I'm going to jump into that. As you're all aware, we have this APOD in the water. It was at the beach area for some time and now it's been moved to Thoreau Cove. John has been working diligently, and Nancy, they're out there all the time. So John, why don't I give you the stage and kind of give us an update on what's been happening?
And John, could I ask you, could you come up here
Yeah, I was
because
gonna-
audio is not.
Is that a good spot?
Yes, thank
I
you.
don't think Nancy's there, is she? Okay.
No.
All right. So hi, my name's John Higgins. Thank you, Beth. And thank you folks for taking care of White Pond, a pond that I'm very familiar with growing up in Concord here. So for the past month or so, see, she's taking notes. I feel like I gotta slow down. For the past month, we've done assessments and field research for the APOD technology at White Pond. And we initially started doing assessment work, looking at water quality, seeing if there were areas of the pond where the cyanobacteria was concentrated more so than other areas, talking to people, their experience, what they've seen. And, based upon that knowledge, just access, we initially put an APOD to the south of what's now the town beach, and had that there for close to 2 weeks, I guess. And it really wasn't a favorable location for us. And, in part, we're out here doing research, and what we learned was that although it was in an area where historically people had reported algae blooms being, it may be because there are more people there too, and they tend to notice it more. But I think what we did find was that the Rose Cove did have a higher occurrence of cyanobacteria bloom in duration of occurrence than other areas of the pond. And that's predominantly due to the shape of White Pond and the predominant wind direction, and also just the shape of the pond. So as the wind blows, it has shallow wind, shallow currents that form, but those shallow currents hit the shore and then they split away, kind of transverse to the wind, depending on what the shoreline topography is. And the Rose Cove is actually inside a larger cove, if you look at it like that. So it tends to kind of focus that in there. So that's why we located our APOD, I relocated it over to Rose Pond. And it's been there for a good 3 weeks now or so. And I did send a summary report, that I could for what we call phycocyanin data. Phycocyanin is
Do you spell that? F
yeah,
or
it's
PH?
it's PHY
Mhm.
COCY. I can't spell it in my head. Sorry.
All right, so if I look it up, I'll probably find it.
Yeah, you should have a copy of our letter.
Yeah, Cheryl, I forwarded a text to you in like 2 minutes.
Okay. Actually, I've written down here too. But, let's see. So it's PHYCOCYANIN.
Okay.
That's something that's unique to freshwater cyanobacteria, more so than other algae or things like that. So that helps us to pinpoint where it happens to be predominantly. And so performance-wise, what we've had so far is that Nancy Leland, our limnologist, is part of this National Science Foundation grant. I do field testing with these probes that give me field results, and she actually comes and collects samples and quantifies them back at the lab. And so the two of us paired together had some robustness to my findings in the field and her lab analysis. And I'm just going to speak to the lab analysis because it's consistent with my field results, a little more definitive. So when we moved it, so before we moved to Thoreau Cove, we actually did an open water sample south of Town Beach and Thoreau Cove. In that lab analysis was telling us there was more cyanobacteria in Thoreau Cove. So we moved the APOD over to Thoreau Cove, and by September 6th, we took our first sample, and we already had about a 50% concentration, 50-fold concentration increase in our APOD trap area compared to the rest of the pond. So what happens is that wind and the currents, they hit our collection members that shape like a big funnel, and it forces it into our trap area. And so what Nancy does is she samples outside of our trap, she samples inside the trap, not inside the APOD, which is kind of the funnel area, and then she samples in the small little trap area. And the small little trap area is really the endpoint for the cyanobacteria as it moves in. And we had a 50-fold increase there in September 6th and maintained that on September 14th. And interestingly, we had a drop in phycocyanin concentration significantly in the apod trap by the third week of September. And, you know, the possibilities were that maybe somehow the trap contents were released. Maybe something else is going on inside the apod trap area. And I've actually seen that consistently since that time. So when I do field work, you know, I use this, it's just a field guide. It tells me like, okay, I'm getting hotter, getting warm, hotter. It's less inside my trap area than it is outside in the rest of the pond. And, you know, the trap is connected to the rest of the pond. So what is it that's going on inside the apod trap area? I kind of postulated, and I think I kind of scuffed a little bit from Nancy, who has more of a background in zooplankton than I do, that the zooplankton may not have been eating that much of the phytoplankton, the cyanobacteria. But, you know, my field results are saying that there's something that's degrading the phycocyan and the cyanobacteria relative to the rest of the pond inside my trap area. Now, I don't know what it is, but when I look inside my trap area, it is swarming with zooplankton now. I mean, it looks like you're looking down at like Central Park on a concert, you know, they're just everywhere in there. So that's just one of the, I think, things that we're going to continue to research. But what we have documented is that the apod trap area in passive mode, which is how it's been working, has increased the cyanobacteria 50 times relative to the rest of the pond, you know, without the samples that she takes. And that we've also documented that, you know, we have prolific amounts of zooplankton. I'm not sure exactly how many different types. Nancy's still looking at that, but certainly those that I can see, much more numerous than other areas of the pond. It's an area that's safe from predation, so they can reproduce without being eaten, and they do reproduce very quickly. So that's kind of.
John, can I interrupt for a second? Could you explain, I don't know if everybody here understands that you put a zooplankton sanctuary there. So that was one of the extras that you've done, which is a good thing.
So any kind of data we see in the field is any data we have is good data, because it helps us to reevaluate, maybe move forward or cut back on some aspect to improve what we're doing. And I did set up a little zooplankton farm last time I was on Monday, actually, and it already has, you know, visibly apparent zooplankton. I think they're what they call copepods. I'm a geologist. I'm not a Nancy Leland, but just numerously, you know, flying around inside this. It's a contained area. So I set up a contained area bed that has, it's like an aquarium, has no inlet outlet other than just open to the environment. And I transferred water that did have some cyanobacteria. When I set it up, had some scum. And I made sure we got some zooplanktons in from my apod trap. And it now has more zooplankton than even on Monday. They have, some of these things have live babies anyway. But interestingly enough, the phycocyanin concentration is higher in my zooplankton farm right now than it is in my apod trap. So there's just something going on here that's of real interest to us. And I think it has some larger implications down the road for, you know, some improvement. It could be some other kind of bacteria. I have no idea, but the data speaks for itself that something's going on. So
I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying that this indicator, the whatever the thing I just couldn't spell,
phycocyanin, yeah.
right?
We call it PC.
Okay, that's
There
easy.
you go.
I'm sorry, I just have an administrative thing. Susan Bates, are we okay here that John is not being seen right now? I just want to make sure we're being open meeting law compliant.
I believe so.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
I don't know,
So this PC, which
Yeah.
indicates if there's more of it, there's more
it's a
cyanobacteria.
biomass indicator,
Right.
yeah.
So it's hot. The surprise is that you're actually seeing that in the trap, those numbers are going down, and it's higher outside the trap.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure
Yeah.
I got that right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I've actually documented coming into the trap. Because I have like an opening, like a funnel, smaller funnel that can close. I can see it coming into the trap. And I know I have flow coming into the trap because there's also little like bits of pine needles and just like surface kind of debris that gets in there. And I clear that out each time. And I check to see if more has come in. It helps me to know that I have flow going in. And I also we have issues with flow because we actually have a lot of weeds and leaves that they clog up the end. So, but it tells us that we have a flow going through. So that's interesting. I think that's just one of the things that we're going to continue to research, and I'll probably do some other samples I'll talk to Nancy about later. Also, starting today, we've been doing passive work. I now switched over to what I call active work, Beth, active use of the APOD. And that is when I do see surface scums, and I have a great picture from one of the nearby residents of our APOD I can give to you folks. But so this is looking from the west side, and you can see our APOD, and there's actually a visible scum. It's about 5 feet wide, just going funneling right into the APOD trap area, which is about there.
I'm gonna hold this up for the
Yeah.
viewers at home.
I have some other pictures. This is actually the picture of the little farm here too. So that's the farm. This is the APOD trap area. Here's some of the weed. Here's some of the. This is my daily cleaning chore. So this is the inlet side of the trap right here, and
cool.
it's small. And we had to come. I had to scoop that out from the outside as well as inside. Here's just some of the little bits I mentioned. This is looking out, so you can see some of the scum actually here coming in. And you can see some of that's the surface, like pine needly stuff. And I clean that out, so I know what's coming in. The other thing I did today was I also put something I call a C pod next to the APOD. C stands for containment, Beth. And what that allows us to do, it's a way of automating the APOD trap function, is that if I go out to the APOD trap and say, yeah, there's some in here, I'm not allowed, maybe not to do a whole removal action, I can pump it from that trap into the C pod, which is just a floating containment vessel, has no inlet or outlet. It has a much larger volume than the trap itself. And after I empty the trap contents, say like 10 times, then I could do a removal action with all the cyanobacteria that's contained in the isolated area. So I put that out there today too. But so I switched to active mode today. And what that means to me is I'm actually going to be out there more often, to the extent that I'm able to, which I have to expand on a little bit. And I have an additional collection member that I put on, so I can draw it across the APOD open area, not just the trap, but the whole wider part. So trap any scum that I have and force it into my trap. I'll take some of that and put it on my zooplankton farm as well, because it's a totally contained area. So if the cyanobacteria concentration decreases in that, there's just less variables to take into account. And I also have a mobile APOD, a smaller version. So if I see a scum over at Sachem's Cove or some area like that, in front of Beth's house or whatever, I'll be able to actually respond to it, contain that. What I would actually do is contain that and remove it and bring it back and put it into the C pod until I have a sufficient quantity removed. So, but I also did have, so our field trials we scheduled them kind of at the beginning of the year to the extent we were able to, and just had to anticipate where we would see harmful algae blooms, cyanobacteria, based upon historical occurrences at there's 7 different field trial locations that I have right now. And 2 of them are just now blooming out, I guess, pretty significantly. I'm supposed to be out there tomorrow and check it, but that may force me to cut my time at White Pond short, but I'm going to extend it so I at least have a good week worth of active response actions at White Pond. So you just have to stay tuned for that. But I have 2 other large surface water supply reservoirs that you can visually see something like from aerial photos. So we'll see.
Can I ask a question? So I assume that the data you would get, so you're seeing larger blooms in other areas, obviously different than White, the physical features are different than White Pond, but I assume that data overall is going to be helpful to determine algae blooms all over, right? I mean, that's the hope, right?
Yeah, no, that's my world. Yeah, so that's totally, there's a whole, actually, in the bigger, why don't you have some blooms?
Yeah, that's
yeah, and, like historically, like we always like clockwork, we get them that's why I was down to Cape Cod this early this season. They always had early blooms. But this year it was really foggy, like almost like rain level fog and cool. And they just didn't bloom out until July-ish. But by then I was already pushing it. I had to get out of there and get back to other places. So
I have a question for John.
yeah.
Are you going to be working there later this week? And if so, what hours? When can I come down and watch? I just like to see what you're doing. I think it's really interesting.
Well, I have to be elsewhere tomorrow. I'm not sure what time yet. I didn't get a message until the end, but I probably will be there. Today's Tuesday. I would say Thursday, certainly.
Today's Wednesday.
Today's Wednesday. See, that's my problem. I have no idea what day it is. Every day's a work day, as long as it's open. So today's
Friday?
Wednesday. So let's say definitely Friday morning, if that's okay.
Oh, okay, that sounds great.
Yeah.
So I live close, so no big deal. I'll just look for you.
Yeah, so I have a little teeny 10-foot John boat, and you'll see me buzzing around. And whereabouts would you be? So if I can see you waving, I can stop by.
Well, no, I can I'll get in my kayak and paddle over to Thoreau Cove. If that's where you're going to be.
I may be elsewhere. I could be in Sachem's. So just look for me, though. You can
I'll
tell.
look for you. Yeah, I'll find you.
You can tell.
There's only one boat like John's.
Yeah.
There's only one.
And I parked my
Hey,
car right next to the boat landing, like right up against those 3 poles.
Mm-hmm.
If you see something there, that's a green Cherokee. That's me.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks so much.
Okay.
John,
Looking forward
I
to
have a
it.
question
Yeah.
about the portable A-pod.
Yeah.
Is that something you're going just to keep and use if necessary, or will you deploy that?
I would keep and use as necessary. So that
Okay.
it's like my salesman size version. It's 100 feet long. It's a small trap. I keep it in a
Okay.
large carboy in the back of my car. It's there
Okay.
now.
Yep.
And I'll bring it out with me, and I use the carboy to transfer any of the trap contents in my boat, like back to the sea pod.
Perfect. Thank you.
We have to talk about water quality data at some point, Beth. You know, we have more data than the phycocyanin data that I provided in my report. Nancy Leland's been very diligently collecting other water quality data in addition to myself. And I would think by October 5th, I guess it is, we can talk a little bit more in depth about that. But
Okay.
it does include the cyanotoxin microsystem. And I guess, I did reach out to Susan and Delia, at least by email, say I had some data I want to talk to, and my colleague Susan yesterday, but I haven't talked to them yet. And when I started this, I had an understanding that I'd relay any important findings onto them as well. And I kind of feel like they need to have that opportunity before I broadcast things too much.
Oh,
But
fine.
I think it's safe to say that cyanobacteria do have toxins, and it is related to their biomass, how many of them there are. And right now, the largest mass is the scum, the largest biomass. When you see a scum on the surface, that has the most biomass of cyanobacteria. And it's the presence of scums that have led to the closures of White Pond. So our data is consistent with that so far.
John, when you're
Yeah.
done,
Okay.
when you say you're gonna have results, would you write something up that would be like a couple of pages that says, here's what we found, here's what happened with the?
Yeah, it'll be at least 2 pages, but I'll try to make it so that it's really not heavy on the verbiage, technical jargon wise.
That'd be great.
I'll try to make it more like a field guide of what our findings were, with some good maps.
Great.
And tables, more visual. But it is interesting to me. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's fun for me, obviously, as a scientist who grew up in White Pond to a large degree, as a member of the private beach club there, to understand it as well as I do now. And I'm still continuing to learn. So I really appreciate the opportunity to help you folks out.
John?
Thank you. Does anybody in the audience have some questions before we wrap this portion
Yes,
up?
Jim does.
In layman's terms, I understand a lot of what you're saying, but not most, a lot of it I don't. Is it too early to develop an expectation of what this is going to do for the pond over the long run?
Well, that's always on our mind, because it's how do we understand the issue, and then part of it goes hand in hand is how do we correct it, because it really is an impairment. Cyanobacteria is everywhere, but not when it's in large biomass quantities that could impact wildlife or aesthetics or people's use or water quality, drinking water. So that is a part of that, and this part of the CPA. Beth had reached out to me when I actually had reached out to Concord, is looking for locations. We had all kind of simultaneously reached out to each other. It worked out pretty well. And, we put forth a CPA application, I helped where I was able to carry that forward. And so when I'm out there, I'm thinking, how would I improve on my APOD application? And it would be APODs, it wouldn't be one. And that's the way I'm doing that. But I think the target most certainly is going to be what I call the low hanging fruit. It's going to be the scum. It's just first off, whatever we do, we need to remove that as quickly as we can and limit its ability to move around more. So hence more APODs, a little bit different configuration. I would actually set up a different type of APOD trap so that I have like a pre-screen to all those like oak leaves and stuff. They can go through the big hole, stuck in the big holes farther away from the smaller stuff, and so to make maintenance less of an issue. So that is the mindset that I have. And the White's Pond is somewhat, so you have a large cyanobacterial mass, but it occupies a lot of room because the water is so clear. And it is a photosynthetic bacteria, and it can go down to like, photosynthesizing down to 18 feet. So it can live in a pretty large water column. But when it photosynthesizes, this is me getting technical, hopefully you'll kind of get the picture. When it photosynthesizes, it produces an electrical charge on it, and it repels the other cyanobacteria from each other. And they actually develop their own wiggle room, almost in a sense. So it's Coulomb's law. It's like a law of gravity, but with electrostatic forces. And so you get that in a water body that doesn't have a lot of opposing forces like wind or current, or narrow areas. And we can force those opposing conditions with the APOD. But I do have an open palette of a large area where your cyanobacteria live. Having said that, they can be toxic, but not when they're in low concentrations. And we do see it doesn't seem to be as much of an issue in those larger. So, but it adds a challenge to us as an APOD, how we would efficiently remove that. And I do have some ideas. It is more of my background, the hydrogeology of it. Yeah, how do I do flows without using huge pumps and everything else? I think I solved that. But
So what would success look like to you?
success would be management of risks. And Susan may be listening to this, and that's always the driver. I mean, it's human health risks is the number one driver for cyanobacteria, whether it's water supply or recreational. So it's managed risk, and the low-hanging fruit would be the scum. And then you'd have to ask, what's causing the scum to, what are the conditions that cause the scum to form? How can we preemptively kind of be there for that? And so that is some of the data that Nancy's been collecting. And it's something that we'll be able to gather more of at a longer term deployment. But that is the ultimate goal. Low-hanging fruit right off the bat. Do whatever we need to control that. We could encircle the entire town beach area if we wanted to prevent any scum from getting there. There's just all sorts of fun things that we could do with this technology. But it's that northern side of the pond, because of the predominant wind direction, where a lot of that stuff, the Thoreau's Cove in particular, it collects anyway. So we would leverage off that natural process.
John, based on what you know, the removal of scum, would that change the ability of people to use the pond? Would that make it, I mean, I totally no science background here.
Yeah.
So just trying to get the sense, because we've talked a lot and heard a lot also about the toxic algae blooms being underneath the water and not visible. So if you get rid of the scum, what portion of the risk does that remove for swimmers, animals, etc.?
Well, that's a large risk. That's a large risk right there. It's a scum.
The scum. Okay.
Based on the data we have, and I don't want to make any health-based.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not our intent, but that's certainly the robustness of the data that we collect. But the scum comes from someplace too. So the larger part of the equation is how do we remove that? Really, what is an excess mass to a large degree of cyanobacteria? But it's certainly the focus on the scum.
Okay.
That's just the visual presence of scum is a recreational limit guideline from the state. So we want to control and manage that and remove it as fast as we can.
But it doesn't deal with the underlying issue of over-nutrification of the pond, right? I mean, it's.
Well, no, it does, because, they are an artifact of the nutrients in the pond.
Yeah.
They are the living breathing
taking in.
aspect of the nutrients. So without the nutrients, you wouldn't have them. But with the nutrients, you have them and they have the nutrients.
So
So
they've
we,
taken up some of
we
the
remove
nutrients
the we remove them and so goes the nutrients.
because they're containing some of the nutrients, not the nutrients necessarily in the soil or whatever.
Yeah,
So
but
Stephen,
John, I have a question. I mean, you're still not,
sorry, Stephen, next.
So they
Sorry. so you still have to deal with the source.
Yeah.
The source of the contaminants. You know, what's causing the water quality to degrade to the point where we have these cyano problems?
Well, so the first part of that is you have a problem now. And it is a cyanobacteria. It's obviously a beach float when you're swimming advisories and clothes, things like that. And that's, you know, whatever the source may be, and there are actually numerous sources. And then here's the geologist part of me again. And then when you add the part of time in the equation, you know, even small sources over time can be an issue today. And so what you have in the pond is decades of nutrients from multiple sources. And, you know, if we're able to remove those decades of nutrients, you may still have some ongoing sources, you know, may still, and you'd probably be able to identify them easier if you could remove the sources that are already in the pond. And the cyanobacteria are themselves a source. And they reproduce, they have seeds, and they come back to life each year, and they gather up anything else they can get. And they are a source that most people don't even take into account when they figure out where the sources are in the ponds and the nutrients. A lot of it's actually in the cyanobacteria. So I will add this to you because it's my, so they do harvest nutrients directly from the sediment, and they can do it regardless, you know, whether it's alum or some treatment like that. And I think one of the things that I'm interested in learning more about is I think they behave much like soil microbial communities do with terrestrial plants, and that the terrestrial plants produce carbohydrates and sugars, and they exchange that with soil microbial populations for nutrients back and forth. I think the same thing happens with the cyanobacteria that also produce sugars and starch with other bacteria in the sediment that also harvest the nutrients. So there are papers on cyanobacteria that have the backpacks of other bacteria with them that harvest the phosphorus and things like that they need. And so they have like this exchange thing going on. So it's we've already shown that when you remove the cyanobacteria, the sediment concentration for at least phosphorus drops significantly in a fairly short period of time.
In the shallow sediments, obviously not
Well,
in
the whole pond.
in the whole pond.
This is a
Interesting.
small pond. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the cyanobacteria itself, their nutrient concentration actually drops. So they did a proof of concept report. Beth,
Yeah,
probably,
yeah,
take a look at that and go through it. And
Yeah.
that'll be good.
Because it looked like you had a separate thing for dealing with the sediment. So
I do have a separate technology for the sediment, but that wasn't what I called sexy. No one really got that. I did lab data, and I had to find something that worked and also sold. People, you know, need to be able to understand things without understanding things. And the APOD allows you to understand how it works because you can see things getting trapped.
Audience question.
Can we, just for keeping us all on track here, can you just raise your hand if you're in the audience, you know, use that technology? And Stephen Crane has his hand up for the next question.
Well, if I was going to ask a question, it was going to be, are we going to be tested on this material? But no, I just want you guys, Susan Rask is out this week, so you probably won't hear back from her till next week. Because I know he mentioned he reached out to her. I'm sure she'll get right back to you when she's back in the office. I just wanted to let everybody know that there's going to be a lag there. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Anybody else with questions?
John, I just want to confirm what you said. So you're saying that the collection of the cyanobacteria could itself be removing phosphorus and nitrogen from the pond that's built up over years and years?
Yeah, and sulfur actually. There's other
And sulfur.
nutrients. Yeah, sulfur is an important nutrient. No one really talks about
Yeah, thank you.
Really by time while other contaminants run off, et cetera.
Well, yeah. So I don't like, some people say, oh, don't treat the pond until you've taken care of all the sources. Well, I don't think of the APOD as a treatment. I'm not leaving things in place.
Mhm.
I'm removing the excess that's already there.
Hmm.
We're trying to, and it becomes self-limited. I can't remove more cyanobacteria than there is.
Right.
So eventually you reach a diminishing return. And that also relates to the amount of nutrients that are available to cyanobacteria to keep producing. So it's a natural way of bringing the water quality back in the pond. And people should still be looking at exterior sources, things like that. And sulfur is actually one of them. No one really talks much about that. But
I have a couple more questions, but I see that there's an audience.
So Ara, go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm very much interested in the report by John. I don't even know his last name. And my question is, where can I go to get more information that I can read to understand the APOD and more of what John was describing?
you can go to I have a sister website, and I'll spell it out for you. It's www.ppodtech.com. So it's peatpodtech.com. And I have downloadable reports there and webinars.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Anybody else?
Katie?
Yes,
Katie.
Kate Blair, 20 Garden Street. Will your report on this pond be on that website or?
Wait, I have to repeat that. So Kate's question is, will John's report on White Pond ultimately be on his website?
It doesn't have to be. I could put it there. Yeah, why wouldn't I? Right? It's like federally funded work.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Right? And I'm working with you folks, so I suppose I will do that.
A question, we're in a correctional phase right now, just trying to get control of the damage currently being done to the pond and clean up the mess that we have right now, and then take measures to prevent future contamination. Is there an application ongoing after the correctional phase for the APOD system, or is it you come in every now and then and do a preventive maintenance job with it?
All right, so we have other versions of the APOD that we'll be working with with National Science Foundation support, if that's how it pans out, which I think it will. And there would be what we call a Sentinel version, which would be an APOD that could be set up. Maybe it's around an area that is known to be a source, and maybe it's some mobile home park and they're all in septic, and it's over by Satcham's Cove, wherever it is. And you can tell which way groundwater flows, so you could position it so that it helps to control that before it enters the rest of the pond. Or you could have it be in a place like Thoreau's Cove, where maybe it isn't going to warrant my weekly visits, but someone on the pond could check it every once in a while, suck it over to a CPOD, which is a containment thing, and then once a month give someone like me a call. So there is a long-term deployment aspect for the APOD that will be a part of the APOD technology.
And
this is great.
yeah, John, how long does the NSF grant go for?
We extended it actually till next, with their approval, till next year, because this year it's been such an odd year for weather and harmful algae bloom occurrence. So it goes through next year. And there's another phase 2 that'll multiple years after that. So we'll hear about it soon enough.
And would White Pond be eligible for those additional phases or not?
Well, we have a larger scale application requirement that we need to kind of do a proof of concept on that we need to demonstrate. And I'm making that case to National Science Foundation that it isn't just a field trial of here's this one little unit, this one little cove, and we're here for a week and we're gone. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it. We get some good data. We would like to actually show on a much larger scale that it just meets all that criteria. The tough thing we've actually had there is, who do we prove that to, other than the science being strong? And because when you meet the world of regulators, they don't always go by science. Okay, no offense, but it's true. And and having said that, to their credit, in Massachusetts, a lot of them are understaffed and don't have sufficient budgets for things. So that's another challenge for us. I'm not sure how to overcome that, other than just expanding myself as a business and actually the CPA grant, things like that. Any other ways that we can get funding And I've even told, the state, if they want to like, blind, trail me around and do their own sampling, they'd be more than welcome to, but it's hard to get them to even do that.
Great.
You want to-
Erwin, you have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is for John. This may be a silly question, but is there a way of just sucking up the sediment? So I know like when they do Superfund sites, they're pulling the sediment out of the rivers. Is there a technology or a way that does it to do that makes any sense?
Well, those are my first two patents there. When the S pod for sediment and then the P pod, which extracts the nutrients from sediment. But it has some logistical applications that were tough to do, given the area of interest. But I haven't said that. What we learned was that the cyanobacteria themselves extract those nutrients, and it's just easy to remove them with a pod. I don't have to have any huge permits, for dredging.
Okay.
I don't have to do, like big, huge land-based areas for dewatering. So if that is, when you don't, I hope you don't have to. And having said that, if you have areas where it's like navigational waterways, or maybe like say the town beach happened to be in Thoreau's Cove, you know what I mean? Some area where you have a naturally high deposition of really soft sediments, the S pod would probably work pretty good for that. It's just kind of like a big suction thing you put down, and you can disturb the fine sediments inside it, suck it out, and just move it over. And you just repeat. And that's on my website. You can see what a pod looks like.
Thank you.
It's just your website.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yes, John, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on your response. If the NSF grant is continued, would that mean you could return to White Pond next summer and do the same thing that you're doing now on a bigger scale? Or are we not eligible?
It's a possibility.
Okay,
And I had to leave it that way because, White Pond isn't the only pond with large issues.
sure.
So.
Okay, no,
Yeah,
that's fine. Just
I
wanted
had
to be
leave it
clear
out there. I
for,
don't know if it's
for the
a
town.
possibility.
Okay.
And I will tell you that, National Science Foundation is the largest equivalent venture capitalist firm in the country.
Mhm.
They fund more entrepreneurial research,
right,
that are supposed to go to commercialization than anyone else. And they put a large emphasis on making sure it's commercially viable.
Right.
Part of that is to see a financial support from the community. Would they be willing to spend the money? Why should we? Like the basic kind of question. And they want to see that as one of their metrics. So if the community can get a CPA grant, that there are venture capitalists and bankers that review my next phase. There's not much technical people to it. And they want to make sure there's the market for that, what it's going to be, how long it's going to take to be profitable. And having a community that comes forward with some match is just going to help set that stage for their approval.
right.
So given that, shouldn't that be noted in our CPA application?
The CPA application's already been placed in, but we can discuss it at the presentation. But I don't think it's going to be helpful to John, as he just discussed, if it's going to be helpful for the future and even for White Pond, even the next year, because the original CPA, we were going to put 2 years in there, but we did not. And John had estimated, correct me if I'm wrong, John, that, probably would take 2 years to get our White Pond cleaned up. So if he gets the grant, it's a win-win both sides.
It is a win-win.
Right.
Oh, but I'm saying it might be worth our while to say that the grants are looking forward to the fact that these towns are supporting their own, I don't know, I would say that's a positive.
Yeah, and we get support too. So, we have a letter of support from the town as well for our grant. And we mentioned as much, and it is not a very expensive, state pod is not expensive. So the financial pro forma is got a very quick launch to profitability.
Right.
Yeah, and I think for the audience who's here, you can look at the town of Concord and look at the application that we wrote for the CPA application, and it talks about the the pricing, the cost, and, you know, the technology. So I welcome, you know, anybody to read that. And like I said, we're going to be presenting, the first presentation will be October 19th.
And Beth, we know the comparable cost of a treatment like alum, right?
Yeah, I mean, we know for example, we know what it's costing at Tully, which is a bigger body of water. We know from other ponds what it costs. It's much more expensive, and it's also long-term deleterious to the environment per se. So this is way less expensive.
Right. So just to be clear about it, so if we thought about White Pond and the treatment of alum, would that be in the 50,000 range, 100,000? Do you have a sense from what you know?
For alum's more expensive than copper sulfate. And they say alum will last 10 years, where copper sulfate, you'll need multiple treatments. But eventually, you know, after so many years, and sometimes, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they predict, like in Tully, 10 years for alum. They didn't do it because that would have been $1 million. So they're doing copper sulfate. So there's a big difference in cost, and it doesn't always work for 10 years either. So as a first stab, an environmentally friendly stab, you know, it seems like something like this is just much better for the environment and for the money.
Sure. I'm just trying to make the point that, so the CPA grant is for $36,000.
Exactly.
We were even going to talk about copper sulfate. We could be talking about even a much lower cost than alum, $500,000.
Alum would be $1 million. Copper sulfate would be probably at least a couple $100,000.
I think that there's actual numbers in the ESS report.
All right. So again, just to make the point clear,
Yeah,
so if we're talking about copper sulfate, we could be talking $200,000-$300,000. And if we're talking about the APOD, we're talking about $36,000.
$36,000. Yeah.
For a couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Just want to make sure the numbers were
On the record. Thank you, Josh.
Copper sulfate, I mean, it'll do the job, but it doesn't do anything about the sources.
Right.
So you use it and then it wears off and the
Have to do
problem
it again.
occurs.
Right.
Well, and
Well,
Susan
And also for our vision, just everybody be clear, we're really clear in the vision document stating this is kind of like remediation, getting rid of the years and years and years of this problem, right? We still need to work on the sources, which is going to be our next, you know, on the agenda. We are having to work on the sources, and we have multiple subgroups working on that. And in the vision, we mentioned some of those things that we need to wrap our arms around. So this would be an immediate type of fix, which is a good thing, and will also, as John indicated, maybe help us to target where the biggest sources are. Sorry, Cheryl, go ahead. If I interrupted you.
Rask at her prior meeting said, in her experience or her research, only 50%, when alum is applied, in 50% of the cases it's successful, and 50% of the cases it's not successful. So it's not even the money. Its success rate is very good.
Yeah, and actually it has much longer term impacts too that they don't talk about yet.
Yeah.
It's primarily sulfur.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know I'll pick on them a little bit now, but large lake in my community, Amesbury, just had a significant aluminum sulfate treatment. It was supposed to last for 15, 20 years. It's lasted less than a year, and the dissolved oxygen content is less now in the pond. Sulfate is an oxygen scavenger. When it goes to sulfide, it goes back to sulfate, takes up oxygen, do that. Water clarity is back to what it was before they did any treatment. And we've got, actually, it's like a great place for me to use the APOD. There's a lot of cyanobacteria now of different types, which are of interest to me. So, but I'm saying sulfate is a long-term impact. I mean,
Yeah.
It's a huge long-term impact. So I just can't.
Yeah. I mean, you're adding one more contaminant to the pond. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Okay, well, I don't see any other hands up. John, I really like to.
Yeah, I have my hand up a second time. So,
Oh, sorry, Ira, I thought you forgot to take it down. Go ahead.
no, I took it down and put it back up again. No, I would
Okay.
just request that the URL be posted and included in minutes, because obviously I copied it down wrong, and my frantic Google searches
Yep.
did not find the website.
It'll be in the minutes.
It will be in the minutes, and I think we actually had it in previous minutes, but Yeah, we'll make sure you have
I'll
it.
go searching for it. Thank you.
I have a YouTube video on it too. It's called the App Trap.
Okay, Stephen Ferry.
Yes, hi. A very quick question. You might have mentioned this right at the beginning, and I don't know whether it's for John or the others of you, but do we have any information as to whether the levels of bacteria have come down as the weather's gotten cooler, or is it still above where it should be?
One of the reasons I'm at White Pond is because you have fairly consistent levels of cyanobacteria, unlike other ponds right now. Honestly, I don't know how else to really phrase that, but I do think because it is a kettle pond and it's so clear, we're actually not seeing that in other ponds. We're seeing a lot higher total organic carbon, dissolved organic matter, particularly colored dissolved organic matter, affecting water quality positively. So I haven't seen a decrease in this year. I mean, it moves around, but I haven't seen like, wait, what happened to that? I certainly haven't seen huge increases. So I think you have a fairly well-balanced respective cyanobacteria population in White's Pond. It's been there a long time.
Okay. And the level is still, I guess you probably haven't measured it, but the level is still way above where people should be swimming, I suppose.
Well, I think that's a Susan. I mean, I really did reach out to the Board of Health. You know, we have some data that can talk to that. You know, Susan, I guess when I did call her, she was out I called late yesterday. I sent the email, but I think she'll be in next week, and hopefully we can talk a little bit more. But we have some good, robust data that I think will help people. I'll have to leave it at that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I can add to that. I mean, I was looking at the same thing. Usually this time of year, as the temperature goes down in the pond, the bacterial will decrease as well. But it was because of the cyano and what John's saying. I'm not going to get into the pond.
Yeah, it's a living animal. It behaves differently. It doesn't always behave as one you might expect. But it's been pretty consistent at White Pond this year for me.
Okay, so again, John, thanks for taking the time to talk with us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, thank you for looking after White Pond. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
You know, I'll leave the photos there if you.
Okay.
John, can you leave those photos so we can attach them to the minutes?
So.
Okay, thanks. Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. So next we're on the agenda. We're going to talk about the volunteer committees. If anybody, you know, we formed multiple groups.
It worked. My just copying in the address. I don't
Carmen?
care, it got me in. You know
Carmen,
what? I was here, I was falling asleep.
Carmen, your
Oh, I'm
mic is
sorry.
on.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is about, and maybe Carmen can send that to Ara right now too, but anyway, the next item on the agenda is our volunteer groups. Some of us have already met, so I would just open it up. I can tell you that the water quality group met, which is Katie Blair, Suzanne Langbridge, and myself, and Jeff. And so we met on the beach a couple weeks ago, and we talked about the White Pond vision and what we're, you know, suggesting. And everybody is on board. And then Suzanne is trying to get information, I think from Carmen, a lot of the data to actually collect it and put it into an Excel sheet. And then I think eventually, Katie, correct me if I'm wrong, we will give that to Dr. Walker to add to his graphs.
Great.
Katie? Yep, good. Okay. So that's a brief update. That was a brief update from the water quality subgroup.
I'd just like to add, at a previous meeting, Delia Kay said that the state has particular requirements about testing. So when you get to that part of figuring out what you really want to recommend, I think it would be valuable to meet with Delia in advance to hear what those requirements are and align.
Yeah, good point. And that's why we're meeting October 5th with Delia and Susan.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So that's ours. I think Jeff and Jim Ricker, you might have an update.
Yeah, we're now called the sewage group, Jeff and me, so it is what it is. Anyway, Jeff and I met last week and talked about the project and what we would like to accomplish and how we're going to go about doing it. And I think that was an excellent meeting. And then this week, we decided Susan Rask was the first place we should start. And we met with her yesterday. And she gave us a lot of time, which was really very generous. And it was kind of more of a discussion than question and answer. And we just wanted to get some help in how to frame this going forward. Some of the things we talked about is, do we agree on the sources of nitrogen and phosphorus? And Jeff and I were focusing on septic system, leachate going through the soil and getting in. And that seems to be now a pretty consistent viewpoint from a lot of people. And she said she also considers runoff still to be a source as much as it's being controlled. She says, I don't discount it or take it out of the picture. And that was interesting. We talked about the map that the youth group put together, and she worked on it with them and went through all our files. And we agreed that this is just a terrific document from which to work and, help us understand where some of the problems may lie. Jeff noted that 5 properties on the north side do not have any information on the map, and none is available in the files of the health department. And we have 2 on the south side of the pond. Not drawing any conclusions from that, but it's, requires further research, I think. We then talked about, we're thinking we're going to look at 2 areas, septic and sewage treatment. And we talked quite a bit about that. And just briefly, there was a proposal to do a sewer line back in 2003 and 4, which would run down both sides of the pond to interceptor sewers and then connect at a treatment plant scaled to size. That never made it. Part of it was who pays for it, and secondly, people in the neighborhood. I guess one of the locations would have been in the field at the corner of Plainfield and Powder Mill. The other one would have been on the grounds of Willard School. And the school committee was not interested. And I guess there was some neighborhood opposition as well. So that did not make it. We also talked a lot about the new septic system technology that's around. It supposedly removes nitrogen and phosphorus. I can't remember which one it is. I guess nitrogen is complete removal and phosphorus is partial removal. And she is not impressed with the results from what she's read. She said they are not, from her knowledge, they're not meeting, what is proposed is not actually happening. She was involved with a program on the Cape where they did a lot of testing of these systems, and she knows 2 of the key people there. And so we agreed we would, Jeff and I are going to go down there in the next few weeks and talk with those folks and get some firsthand information. And they have a whole system where I think it was the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Testing Facility. I think it was in Barnstable, but we'll know all that before we go. So we think that'll be very valuable information. And if it's really clear that it's not that effective, there isn't any additional technology coming, I think most of our focus will shift. Not that we have all the answers, but would shift more to sewer. How do we put in an affordable, effective sewer system around the pond and then treat it properly without creating chaos and pay for it. And I think, Jeff, you jump in if you think I'm off base here, but I think she's definitely more a proponent of sewage treatment as opposed to septic.
Yeah, and I thought that was very interesting. She's very knowledgeable about septic systems and wastewater. And she much more than myself. I'm just learning about wastewater and septics pretty much. But I thought she gave a really good point that if you just try and upgrade everybody's septics, it's a real pain, you know, you're gonna have a lot of resistance, it's gonna cost a lot of money, and in the end, you're gonna have a partial solution. Whereas if you go with wastewater, you have a full solution. And as far as the runoff argument, we were kind of arguing the same thing. I agree with runoff. It's the issue, it can be an issue, but it's runoff of, it's percolating and bringing the leach field into the pond. But as I talked to the people at, God, what's the town today? I talked to the health guy in Mansheen. I saw an article where they have almost the same problem as we have with their pond, the same number of septics on their pond. And they voted in a town-wide vote. They're going to put a wastewater system in, and the town accepted it, even though it's only for the people in the pond area. And from what I've heard in the past, is the reason that it didn't pass in 2003 was people thought it was going to create a lot of development. And Jim, you were here. I wasn't, so you would know. But I was told by someone else in the health department that the thought was at the time that putting a wastewater plant in, there were a lot of empty lots still, and that people thought it was going to create a lot of development around the pond. And I think that resistance would not be there now. And with the pond being closed all summer, I think it would pass.
Guys,
Jeff, can I just interrupt for a second, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm
Susan
done.
Susan Bates, who is our liaison from the select board, had a discussion and suggested that we invite Alan to our next meeting or one of our upcoming meetings, because he also was here at the town and would have some other insight into why it didn't go forward or what happened. So
Yeah.
I'd just like a motion that we can invite him, and maybe that will help with your data collection as well.
And actually, Beth, if I may, I actually had a long conversation with Alan Cathcart over the summer about this exact issue. I have notes from that call. I brought it up in one of our meetings as well. So Jeff, Jim, maybe I can get those notes over to you guys. And I've got history about what happened with the votes, with the plan.
Oh, good.
And then the subsequent, where'd the money go?
And it's in our minutes. So
It's in the
we can
minutes,
look in the minutes.
Speaking of Alan, he's, I think he's our next stop within town, and Delia, and either order, whichever one we get to first, but we think those two more very critical people for us to be able to get to the point of a recommendation.
Great.
So, you know, Alan has engineering kind of experience, and Susan's got the health, and Delia's got natural resources. So I think those three can really help us a lot. And I think we'll use the same approach we did with Susan. We'd like to continue to collaborate with you so that we don't go off into left field and nobody thought we were headed that way.
Right.
So I was really encouraged. I think Jeff was too after that meeting. It was just very open and clear that we had the same goal.
Right.
Yeah, I think we're being solution oriented. I think it's really going in the right direction. I think people are realizing we need to do this.
Good, great news.
Add, guys, also that when I was working on this over the summer, I got some community feedback that suggests that this will continue to be something that needs to get sorted out. I think it would be very important to figure out who pays for it, how they pay for it, what betterment fees might look like, and how those betterment fees could be reduced for particular populations as part of the overall recommendation. So I think it would be easy to say, yes, sewage, great. But I think walking in, really being clear about the money and where, who's impacted and how that can be mitigated, importantly, I think will be a really critical part of being able to provide a strong recommendation.
Yeah, and we talked about that, and one of the things we talked about is the grant money. And she said at one time it was readily available, it's since dried up, and she's hoping that if the infrastructure bill ever goes through Congress, that there may be some of that kind of money becoming available again for these kinds of things. But I don't think it's something we should hold out a lot of hope for, but if they're great. And I mean, the The neighborhoods, we have experience with betterments for when we redid our roads 20 years ago. So on Shore Drive, for example, we had to remove everything, clean out the gravel bed, fix that, and then the town in turn came in and did the 2 coats of paving. So we paid the contractor directly for the preparation of the bed, and then we paid the town through betterments. So there's experience with it, but you know, if this is $40,000-$50,000 a whack, let's say, I don't know, you know, the betterments would have to run. I suppose if it's a sewer system, you can say it's got a 50-year life, so we'll amortize it based on the betterment per year for 50 years or something. I don't know.
Right.
But that's to come. That's going to be a critical thing, I think.
Yeah, I think, you know, we have to just, after you collect your data, then, you know, the next phase is what does it take, right? So,
Yeah,
thank
I was
you.
encouraged though that on the Cape, they got the whole town to pay for the septic of the,
Yeah.
I mean, for the sewer for the pond area.
Well, great. Thank you for that report, and look forward to the further updates you get. Moving on, so we can get this meeting over at a reasonable time. I don't see any of our other volunteer groups here. I did invite the social media group. I thought they were going to be able to report today, so I have no update on what's happening with that. And unless somebody in the audience does, I don't see them there. So I think the next thing on the agenda is Josh actually wants to create another group, I'll say, which is related to people management. So Josh, I'll let you take the floor.
Thanks, Beth. So one volunteer group that we didn't touch on a couple of weeks ago was people management. It's a big part of the vision, and it's not something that I don't think anybody's really tackled so far. So now that the vision is done, which is great, I would think that I'd like to form a people management group. And that would require speaking with a number of police departments and town departments. And I don't have any kind of adequate information at this time, but I think first thing would be a listening tour of who knows what, who thinks what. And especially with the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and the development on 117, starting to form a picture about what people management around White Pond might look like, taking Walden as an example. So I'd invite anyone and everyone to join me. Probably won't do anything actively for a couple weeks, just my own work schedule. But somewhere around the middle of October, I figure I'll start to reach out and get to work on this. That's okay with everybody.
I think
Sounds
that's
great.
Sounds
Anybody
great.
want to volunteer? Raise your hand. I can see those hands being raised, going once,
Well,
twice.
while we're on the volunteer, I'm gonna resign from the water quality group just because I'm spending so much time with the sewer group.
That's fine.
Yeah, sounds
you.
good.
Yep,
Yeah.
thanks, Jeff. Okay, I don't see anybody raising their hand, Josh.
Okay, I'll work at it myself a little bit, see where I get.
Josh, hold on one second.
I think it's too big an issue to leave for the rail trail is in and the Sudbury development is in place. We'll figure out what to do. Because that course could be long out of the barn before we get around to it.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great idea. You know, that's Trick will be working, figuring out all the departments that need to be involved.
Right.
Sure. I figure it's a good winter project.
Yeah.
When traffic is lower, and maybe we could have something a scarecrow, a straw man put up by the spring.
I think we can do a call for volunteers, and I'm sure we will get some, because there was many passionate people, you know, on that topic. So
Hi, this is Mary Beth. I'm on under Irwin's name here with Irwin. And that is a group I'd like to volunteer for.
Okay.
great. Thanks, Mary Beth.
You're welcome.
Mary Beth, can you email me or anyone whose email you have, and that'll get to me?
Okay, who's asking me to do that?
Josh Gelper.
Josh, I don't know if I have yours, Josh, but I have Beth.
Yeah, just send it to me, Mary Beth,
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
and I'll get it to you. Thank you so much
Okay.
for volunteering.
Yes,
You're
thank
welcome.
Great. Okay, so the next topic, Stephen, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'd like to get a better sense of what the people management group's objectives are. Like what Josh, what do you see? When you go on your listening tour, what questions you're going to ask? Is there a specific place you want to get to? I just want to better understand, what the purpose is for this, because as you know, the town has people management programs out there as well, and I just want to make sure that there's some synchronization there.
Sure. So what we know so far is that people management is a top concern for residents around the pond. People have said there's a lot of people coming through neighborhoods, a lot of parking. As you know, a lot of trash left at the pond. There are a lot of questions about, will the pond become a destination for people from the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail? The 117 development is advertising access to White Pond in their marketing literature. There are parties down at the pond at night. There are fires. So the questions are, first of all, there may be a non-issue. But the feedback that we've gotten so far is that residents around the pond are quite concerned. So the first questions are, what are the real issues? What are the chief concerns? Is it trash? Is it numbers of people? Is it nighttime activity? People around the pond know that they can call the police if there's a particular issue. And we, of course, the rangers being there over the summer, that was great. But we're wondering, and it's come up in the vision and when we've heard from people in the community, is should there be something more structured? Should Concord and Sudbury be coordinating? Should there be signage around the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail saying do or don't or do something? I have no answers at this time, but I think that given the amount of comments that we've heard from the community, and this is going back, this was in the 2015 vision as well, I think we sort of owe it to hear what people have to say more, hear what the towns have to say, see how things line up, and should there be any further steps?
Yeah, I think another concern, Josh, is it's not so much the behavioral things are obvious, but not so much the behavior of people, but if you have masses of people, which I've heard is, people are going to use that part of the rail trail and are going to want to use the pond. Most of the time you go to the bathroom, you go in the pond, and we've heard a lot about how urine creates a terrible problem related to the bacteria and so forth. So, do we need to provide facilities?
Right. Should there be a bathroom at Sachem's Cove?
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, that's the place I'm thinking of most, because it's adjacent to the trail, and that's where the trails from Sudbury lead.
Yeah.
Primarily.
So Stephen, a question is, you mentioned that there is there a town group already working on this that we could liaison with?
Well, it's the same group that has been here. We have talked about it internally. And I was referring really predominantly to the rangers and then the management of the beach, which are two key parts of our people management strategy. I think one of the things that I've learned is that it's complicated in terms of what rules you can impose and what you really, what rights do people have to come to the pond, what areas, are they not supposed to be coming to, how are they supposed to be behaving, what are advisories, what are bylaws, what are state statutes, what are the enforcement mechanisms, all of those things. It gets pretty complicated, especially since you have a mix of conservation land, recreation land, and private land all around the pond. And then the pond is as you all know, a great pond that has some regulatory oversight by the state. And so I think and this is just a suggestion, Josh, rather, sorry. Josh, I think, a listening tour and kind of getting people's input about what issues they're seeing out there is very valuable. And I think we do want that input. I guess what I would say is perhaps some kind of session on, what is the regulatory environment, overlaying the ponds in all areas may be helpful, so people know kind of what things can we reasonably manage and what things does the regulatory environment really prevent us, either at the local level or at the residential level, from, enforcing, managing, whatever action word applies depending on the situation. My fear is we get down a path of, well, we ought to, put up a 10-foot fence or, and I'm just being somewhat facetious there, but start to really latch on to an idea that seems to work, but then only to find out that it just simply isn't allowed by the Great Pond rules or whatever. So, and I think the town, I think the police department can be a part of this. I think the NRC can be a part of this. And maybe we may ask somebody from the Commonwealth to join us as well to have that discussion. But I think that should probably be maybe a focus of one of these meetings at some point in time. I think off season is a good time to do that. But maybe that's an agenda item discussion. Just a suggestion.
I think that's a great idea. So I would say absolutely yes. Part of also, so my own thinking about this isn't so much to come out and say a 10-foot fence or any other firm recommendation. One of the experiences I had working on the vision is that people, especially in the White Pond neighborhoods, really want to be heard. And they have an experience that they have not been heard around White Pond issues. So even if people management winds up not having firm recommendations, but really getting people heard and bringing information to the fore, what regulations would work and would not work, for example. I think that would actually, in my mind, meet an important objective of what I have in mind for this project, volunteer group effort, what have you.
I have a suggestion along that same line. I think as well as having a meeting that focuses on what are the regulations, who are the different bodies, maybe we could arrange for some kind of a listening session where the people managers from the town have a chance to listen to the concerns of the White Pond neighborhood residents, whatever, and just have it be a listening session.
Yep, I think that's great.
I do too. And that's one of the things Josh had an idea about that. That's when we did the meet and greets in the neighborhoods, even in the beginning. So yeah, I think a combination of what everybody just said, Steve and Mary Beth, Josh, and that's what this committee can start doing and work on that plan. So I think it's a good idea.
And
Go ahead.
Laura
Yes, I see Laura has a question. Go ahead, Laura.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say I would be happy to volunteer to help with collecting narratives. That's kind of my background in compassionate communication, and I'm a writer, and I'm also a person who is really working closely with the library, trying to talk about how people communicate throughout town. So if you would like help with that, Josh, I'm happy to help you.
Great. Got 2 volunteers tonight. Thank you. All right. So can we close this subject now? Anybody else want to comment on this or volunteer? I mean, it's in its infancy, so we'll be updating at these WPAC meetings. Okay, so then I'm going to move to the last agenda item, and that is just other business discussion, question and answers. Is there anything anybody wants to add, comment on, request?
Has John Coleman joined us online? No?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here. Yeah.
You are? Oh, great.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, John. Oh, terrific. So Beth, this is John Coleman, who's teaching a class with Concord Adult Education. I asked him if he could join and give us a couple of minutes about what he's doing. And he's written actually reports and books on the ponds around Concord. May we recognize him, Beth, and give him a couple minutes?
Yep, thank you. I saw that in the Concord, the education that you're doing this, so thank you. Yeah. You have the floor.
Yeah, Josh asked me to say a bit about what I do. And I am teaching this short course in Concord about the ponds and how they work. I also actually run an agricultural services company that helps farmers seed cover crop on their properties. You might be more interested in what I have done than what I'm doing now. I worked 30 years for the U.S. Geological Survey in the Water Resources Division, mostly in Massachusetts. My projects were Walden, specifically was leachate from the Concord landfill entering Walden through the groundwater. We expanded that study a lot to determine the geohydrology, the ecology of the pond. And the results might be of interest for White Pond Advisory Committee because the two ponds, White Pond and Walden, are pretty similar. Each have an eastern swimming beach, even a western railroad embankment. I also worked on Cape Cod, the 20 named ponds, Cape Cod National Seashore, and Wellfleet and Truro. And just before I retired, I did a project on transport of nutrients from septic systems and cesspools to Eel Pond, which is a coastal embankment in East Falmouth, Massachusetts. I also did a numerical modeling project on transport of phosphorus and non-calcareous sand aquifers, which is the kind of aquifer that exists around White Pond. The two ponds, Walden and White, are similar, but in respect of cyanobacteria, they're different. Walden hasn't had a beach closing cyanobacteria bloom that White has. It might be useful for the management standpoint to hypothesize why there's a difference. Both have global warming effects. Both are subject to swimming pressure, atmospheric deposition. So why is that White is one way and Walden another? Another question is why are so many lakes and ponds in the Northeast getting cyanobacteria blooms just now? That we can kind of consider, why is this happening through the region? And actually, I have some answers to that, but they're kind of technical chemistry questions, so you can maybe contact me another time to hear more about that. Since I'm the last item on the agenda, I thought I'd drop a few bombshells just to keep people awake. I've been looking through the EES reports that you have, and I believe that the watershed that's drawn there is not correct. About half of it probably is in error. Generally, the contributing areas to the kettle ponds are not circles all the way around the pond with the pond in the center, but they're just exist on one side, the up gradient side, and don't exist on the down gradient side. So if you're thinking about sewering or you're thinking about relocating septic systems over a groundwater divide, you have to have a correct contributing area defined in order to be successful. Let's see. And actually, Walden had the same problem of septic systems within the contributing area. And there, the solution was to relocate the leach field outside the contributing area of the pond. And that's been successful. Again, I point out that it hasn't had a cyanobacteria bloom problem. Maybe I'll stop there and ask what more I can comment, or what do you want? Where do you want me to go with this?
Well, John, actually, I think if you're willing, I think connecting you with the sewage group would be the right thing to do from here. That these are the guys who are working the most on this issue and would greatly benefit from your expertise. I think Jeff Parker, who I'm not sure is still on the line, in particular, would enjoy speaking with you.
Okay.
So that's okay?
Sure.
Great. So we'll connect you up. And Stephen Ferry is.
Yes. Hey, John, quick question. When you looked at the ESS data, which side of White Pond is the contributing side? Do we know, or which sides, plural?
Well, I'm not sure. So in order to determine that, you have to look at groundwater elevations around the pond. And there isn't that kind of data in the report, I don't believe. They did go in the pond and look at with seepage meters, where was water coming in and where was water going out. Remember that section of the report?
Vaguely, not real well.
And I think that they were saying that the southwest corner from the seepage meter data showed water flowing out. So that would, presumably be the down gradient side and not be a side where, you know, water is contributing or septic systems would be contributing to the pond. But to really work it out, you have to look at water level elevations in the aquifer around the pond. What I think was done instead was to just connect all the topographical high areas, and, you know, as you would for like a river system, or, you know, the Continental Divide is the highest part.
Right, on the surface, which isn't the whole story. Yeah.
Turns out the groundwater divides do not correspond with the topographical divides
So,
in a sand aquifer.
so John, have you ever met with Delia Kay? Because she was the one who, you know, was active in commissioning, you know, for those reports. And I think they're in discussions right now, even to do some additional testing. So if you think that that was an error, I would, you know, strongly suggest that you reach out to Delia. I can give you her email because she may have some information that's, be surprised or contrary, I'm not sure, but I think it's important.
Well, I mean, I don't want to, you know, I don't know. It's kind of a tough one, like to go and do that. I'm not sure exactly. Maybe your group that's working on sewering would be a more appropriate one to approach Delia.
Okay. All right. Yeah, just that, you know, we're active, the town may be actively engaging them again. So I just was thinking time might be of the essence, but okay. So I guess Jeff and Jim.
John, are you familiar with the tests that were done regarding the plume from Sperry many years ago? The chemicals they had put in the ground were creating a plume, and the question was, is it moving towards the pond? And test wells were drilled, and it was determined that it's moving away from the pond. And then the remediation sites were set up south of the pond. So that kind of supports what you're saying about the southwest.
Where was this site?
Pardon me?
Where was this site?
This is the Sperry land.
Oh, Sperry land.
Yeah, which was.
Yeah, I would agree that land is probably downgraded and it would be moving away. But if you look at your watershed around the pond, you know, it shows an extent in that direction, which I don't think is correct.
Guys, this might be a good thing to take offline.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, John, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Josh, if there's continued discussion, I'm actually going to have to leave the meeting in a minute or two. If it needs to continue, just to let you know. Is there anybody else that would like to have any general discussion or a point? Okay, I don't see any hands up. So, you know, like I said in the beginning, thank you everybody who's attended. Thank you for everybody who had input into the vision and the CPA document. I think we're getting a lot done, and I thank the town and the attendees greatly for their support. We're going to be sending the vision document to the select board tonight. And we look forward to further discussions about the vision document.
Or tomorrow morning, yes, but shortly.
Well, it's ready. There's no more red lines. So with that, I'd like to move that we close the meeting.
Seconded.
Great. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Great.